Alrighty, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profound Logic's webinar, IBMI Transformation Risks Every Business Leader Should Know. My name is Miranda Van Horn, and I'm the marketing specialist here at Profound Logic. Today, you'll be hearing from IBM champion Mike Pavlak and Profound Logic's VP of Strategic Accounts, Michael Killian. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat, and we will answer all that we have time for. Additionally, we will send out a document after the webinar with all of the questions and their answers. Also, you will be prompted with a survey upon exiting the webinar. We would really appreciate it if you could take time to respond to it so that we can make the next one even better. And that's enough from me. Let's hear from Mike and Michael.
And thank you, Miranda. Hello, folks. This is Mike Pavlak. And just a quick run through the agenda to kind of give you an idea of what our focus is for today. When we talk about transformation, there's a lot of things to consider. Michael and I worked really hard to kind of distill that down. So we're going to start off with, what is transformation and why are we even considering it in this day and age? We'll get into the risks associated with legacy transformation and some of the pain points that may come along with that. And then, of course, what do you do about those risks? How do you address them? And then, of course, how does Profound help you to reduce that risk? And then we're going to wind down with a kind of a discussion around why Node.js, because as you'll find out, a lot of our solutions are based around Node.js. And as a very modern technology, we want to share with you guys how powerful it really is.
Perfect. So I'll go ahead and jump in. So good day, everyone. This is Michael Killian. I wanted to personally welcome everyone to today's webinar. I really appreciate you allowing us to intrude into, I guess, your new normal workday for the next 15 minutes or so. We know that things are a little bit different, actually quite a bit different these days. And so we know a lot of you are not in the office anymore. And so we'll try to keep this virtual presentation as a kind of a judgment-free zone as we proceed. So we'll happily excuse any unexpected interruptions from children, pet noises, knocks on the doors by delivery people, whatever the case might be. And so I'd like to give a special shout out, by the way, to parents and grandparents that are on the call today. I know a lot of your children just started virtual school this week. So I applaud you. I wish you guys all of the peace and patience you may need as you kind of re-engage in education in a way that you probably never thought you would. But with that said, here's what I know as we kind of begin talking about transformation. In this new world, it's really become clear that transformation and change happens, whether it's planned or not. And so just like opportunity, we want to be really ready when that transformational change knocks on our door. And being ready is really the whole purpose behind today's session. But before really jumping into the kind of meat of the seminar, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a level set since we've got people joining from all around the world. And everyone probably has a little bit of different definition as to what transformation is. So we'll just kind of talk about that for a few moments before moving forward. Here's what I can tell you. I've been working with organizations regarding the transformation of their IBM IT assets over the last 2 decades now. And there's one common problem that has to be overcome in every single successful transformation journey that I've encountered. And that problem is that business and IT are not aligned. And I can't tell you how many IT departments reach out to us to talk about their transformation initiatives. And somehow during that conversation, we hear that they're going to bring in the business after a strategy has been developed. So I just want to be clear as we kind of start this out that that is a recipe for disaster. I really can't stress enough how critical it is that we all agree that success is really based only on the fact that value is recognized by the company, not by IT, not by a department, by the company. And that's really how success is going to be judged. So before moving on, I'll just say if there's one thing that you walk away from today's discussion, I'd love it to be this, and that is that business and IT must be 100% aligned on transformation initiatives. IT doesn't drive transformation, business drives transformation, and IT enables it, and they've got to be unified. So with that piece clear, let's go ahead and move on to the kind of definition of transformation that we're going to be using for this particular webinar. And transformation is really simply looking back at what has brought you to where you are today, kind of assessing each and every one of those components, and then re-envisioning how the business should be in the future. So that typically means kind of getting kind of keeping the things that work great, repurposing the things that work well, and within reason, kind of getting rid of some of the things that don't support that new vision. Then you put all of that together in a strategy on how to get where you want to be, and then finally you execute on that strategy. So I'll stress again, this is a corporate initiative that must involve every person and all departments and all operations. It can no longer be a siloed initiative. It can no longer be a siloed vision. It has to be a unified vision that both IT and business agree upon. And lastly, before we move on, I'd like to make one additional point, which is not on the slide. And that is that transformation is really a journey. It's not a destination. And so if you think you'll be done once you've kind of reached a specific target, you're unfortunately mistaken. Transformation is really evolutionary, and it has to be done in a way that sets up a strong foundation so that future generations can continue with the always changing vision that's needed for sustained corporate success. So let's go and move on to the next. Perfect, thank you. So let's talk about why transform. And I'll just acknowledge here that I've probably broken every single PowerPoint best practice on the slide by giving you so many textual bullet points, but I did it on purpose. I did it this way on purpose. And so, and that was really that there's not only one reason to transform, there's a myriad of reasons. And in fact, the reasons for transforming might be different depending on what department or division you're even in. So multiple definitions, regardless of if even within the same company. So, but if I had to boil it down to one reason to transform, I would say that the single answer would be survival. Someone, whether that be a current competitor, a new disruptor, or an organization that's trying to encroach on your market, someone is after the business that you currently have. And so resting on your laurels and thinking that, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that's no longer an option. You have to move forward, and your chances of survival become less with each day that passes. So I won't bore you with going through the entire list of the whys that are on this slide, but let me just point out a few that I think are worth highlighting. Excuse me. Number one is do it for the customer, right? If the customer experience is not number one on your list, you might want to be rethinking your list. So customer, by the way, it kind of varies as far as the definition. It could be an internal customer, it could be a partner customer, it could be an end customer. But if your focus is not in making the best experience for your clients, for your customer, utilizing the channel that they prefer, whether that's mobile or web or chatbot or partner sites or anything else, then you might want to revisit your transformation reasons. So number one, for the customer. Another one, and we've all heard of it, and I'll mention it later. It'll probably come up 2 or 3 times during this session, but programming resources are challenging, which means that recruiting of that talent is really difficult. And so this, as we all know, is especially true in the IBM space, with limited RPG programmers available for the ongoing continuity of the business. Another one of the biggest reasons to transform is that there's so much IT time spent maintaining applications that have been written over the years that IT is really struggling to deliver innovation, much less drive and participate in developing ways that the business can innovate. So many times the business gets so frustrated at the constraints that are being placed on them by IT that they move on with other options. And so it's extremely important that we kind of address as we're looking at why we're transforming, so that IT can be proactively involved in the innovation piece of the organization. Another one is the biggest transformation value always has dollar signs associated with it. So reducing cost is a major reason why people look to transform. And although we know that administering an IBM I is generally very low in cost, when it's looked at in a holistic way with like tenured salaries, opportunity costs, a number of other factors, that value perception could be different than you might think. So we really need to look at the reducing cost aspect of this as we look at why transformation is so important. Next, clients want to move to the cloud for a number of reasons. They want to focus their very limited resources, and especially in today, their very limited resources, on their core business and not on the hardware that's needed to run it. So this is really a major transformation path for many companies that are looking to consolidate while they're looking to grow. And additionally, many companies can't effectively forecast what their hardware needs are. So they either overbuy now because of, they're forecasting some future need, or they buy what they need now and realize that they're probably going to have to take a hit for that at some point in the future if they were to grow. But all of the while, the cloud as a destination kind of waves away all of those scalability concerns. Next, wanted to kind of just speak about future, right? And the new and exciting technologies that are available, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all kinds of other things. So many organizations are really not positioned to take advantage of these solutions today. And that can be problematic, and especially when that comes to combating things like competition. So transforming now allows organizations to effectively use new technology to maintain or even catapult their status in the market. And then I guess last but not least, should we forget something that we kind of face daily, is that what about things that happen to us like we're experiencing now with COVID? There are concerns about how long this pandemic is going to last, how it's going to change the way we work and how we interact. There's concerns about future pandemics, and there's even talk about asteroids hitting the Earth. So although none of us can really predict what the future holds, we really need to put ourselves into a position to be agile enough to adapt in the best way possible. So again, a number of reasons why to transform. I just wanted to highlight a few, but if there are others that matter to you, definitely we'd be happy to chat with you about those. So as we move on, we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about typical project risks in the world of transformation. And just like there were many reasons why, there's also a lot of risks that could take place depending on what the organization is and what strategies they've put in place. So Mike and I are going to take you through some of those today, but I just want to highlight a few again as we kind of get going. So number one is, if expectations are not set correctly, an initiative will always fail. So transformation is not just some silver bullet that always delivers amazing results. We have to be transparent about the results that should ensure that all expectations are met on the back end. Secondly, we wanted to kind of move on to the next point of tackling projects alone. And so, I don't know, my mother used to tell me, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so that same principle rings true in transformation. These are large and very complex initiatives that need guidance and support from experts. So you might think that you have the wherewithal to do this on your own, and who knows, maybe you do. But those available resources might be better focused on assisting with a transformation project and bringing continuity and clarity to the entire process, instead of maybe just tackling the transformation project itself. So, so those resources are extremely important on that piece. Next, I know we've already talked about the huge risk of not aligning business and IT, but it bears mentioning here again. Both of those have to be, excuse me, so involved from the very beginning and so unified from the very beginning. Next is continue on to the skill sets, which is really kind of going along with the complexity issue that we previously mentioned, but it really drills down more into the area of skills. So whereas someone may know the before environment, like let's say RPG in the IBM My World, and they may even know the target environment, let's say Node.js or Java or .NET, there are skills that are really required outside of that to move from one to the other. And those skills are needed from a tool perspective, a methodology perspective, and a process perspective. So these are typically one-use skill sets in organizations. So partnering with someone that does this every single day makes eminent sense. And then lastly, as far as a risk, budget is probably always the biggest risk. Really not delivering on time or within the financial parameters that were agreed upon. And so this is, again, where partnering with an expert that has done this before is so important, and is able to really utilize processes and technologies and methodologies to ensure on-time delivery and that cost parameters are achieved. So moving on to the next, I just wanted to kind of get into one, and before really passing this on to Mike, I just wanted to talk a little bit more on the detail of one of the risks. So if I had to guess, I would say that, I don't know, 75% of the companies that come to us for assistance with their transformation needs are doing so because of resource limitations. And that's very specifically the upcoming retirement of their RPG programmers. So Pew Research, I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but Pew has done some research and has some great information on this topic, in that the legacy RPG code was written by baby boomers, and there are about 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. So if there's not warning lights going off on this topic, then there should be. If we don't do something about the legacy code, at some point that there's going to be very few people left to maintain it or enhance it. And very few in our world means that supply and demand is going to mean that there's going to be long wait times for results, and they're going to be extremely expensive options. So we've all kind of become accustomed to saying, hey, we'll tackle that issue at some point down the road. And then we sit back and hope and pray that point won't come while it's on our watch. However, I think that Pew Research and the US Census also came up with some great collateral that kind of gave us a target date of reckoning, and that is now 2030. So 2030 is another date I'd like you to remember. And that's really when the US Census is saying that all baby boomers, which are the ones that have written the majority of the legacy code, will be retiring by that time. And so in my world of simple math, that means that companies have about 10 years or less to strategize, transform, deploy, have new teams in place to support those transformed applications. And I can assure you that each and every one of those steps needed for a successful transformation journey do not happen overnight. So that means that companies need to start acting now. So I actually misspoke earlier when I stated that if you walked away with only one thing, that I wanted it to be that business and IT must be aligned. It should actually be that business and IT must be aligned, and that alignment must include a delivery and transition date that's no later than the late 2020s. And because business continuity is going to definitely depend on that. By the way, I'd like to send out some love to those RPG programmers that brought us to where we are today. And I really would plead with all of you to kind of use them over the next decade as much as you can in your transformation plan. They're amazing, amazing mentors. They know so much about the company. They know the reasons that the decisions were made over the years. They know the inner workings of so many departments. So let them share that vast amount of knowledge, maybe through something like an apprenticeship program or something, so that as you bring in new hires, that they can make sure that there's this historical reference as new developers kind of pick up the torch and carry it forward on that. So with that said, I'll turn it over to my partner in crime, Mike Pavlak, for some additional risks to discuss.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And, let's get Michael a little short break here, because we're going to jockey back and forth on some of these slides here. So you're not just listening to one voice. And I think, many hands make light work, as we like to say. But one of the things that we see, when we get a lot of calls from customers in the IBMI space, is the legacy skills, right? Legacy developers, RPG developers. I'm an RPG developer, so I'm one of these people, and I grew up with PDM and SEU and all these great tools are out there, and these were fantastic tools back in the day. But the reality is that some of the studies that we see out there, these legacy skills, they don't translate to modern tech. So when we're seeing, the kids coming out of school, there's an expectation that there's going to be modular code. The kids don't know what a go-to is. They don't know what global variables are, and they've been trained in a certain way that when we get them in an RPG shop, sometimes we have to undo some of that formal training that they've had. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not such a good thing. So when we see that, statistics like Forrester, and by the way, as Michael and I quote a lot of our statistics, this research, all of these stats have been researched, and the links to those stats are actually on the bottom of each slide. So after the webinar, you want to download the presentation, you'll be able to have access to all these links, and you can verify our research. Tell me if we made a mistake. I mean, there's certainly possible, but we did go through a lot of effort to make sure that we gathered credible statistics, not just Joe's blog over there. But Forrester, another reputable company out there, has talked about the fact that 12% of enterprise shops have adopted modern tools. That's a terrifying thought out there, but even more so, almost a third of these, or a little more than a third, are using legacy tools only. Again, PDM, SEU, fantastic tools, but if you're doing RPG free and you want to be doing more modular code, getting into a bench like RDI and using more progressive tools like VS Code, these are great for progressing and moving the ball forward. And we want to take advantage of these things out there. Another kind of interesting statistic, and this is, I think, very indicative of the IBMI shops that I've grew up with, because when I started in IBMI shop, there were 3 programmers. There was the RPG programmer, there was the senior RPG programmer, and the junior RPG programmer. We were all using PDM and SEU. But as needs changed, as needs evolved, new developers were brought on board. Other tools were brought in the shop, the Microsoft tools, Linux tools, all these different development tools, and And again, Forrester's research is saying something along the lines of, anywhere from, over 51% of the shops are using a combination of tools, and 33% of the shops are using more than 20 tools. That's terrifying. How do you maintain, how do you keep up with all that crazy stuff out there? So the tool proliferation in some cases could be as challenging as the old tools that we're dealing with out there. Okay, if you've never seen me present before, this might be new to you, but I've been talking about this very, very aggressively for the last 5 years. That monolithic code is another area of pain and suffering. And why? Why is monolithic code a problem? Oh, the order entry program's been running great for 20 years. Why should we change it now? The reality is that, well, if you look at Uncle Bob Martin and some of his statistics, he tweeted out a couple of years ago that the number of developers doubles roughly every 5 years. Now, if you translate that, that means half the developers in the world have less than 5 years of experience. That means they're still learning code, they're still learning frameworks, they're becoming experts. But what are they becoming experts in? And if we're talking about modern skills, if that half of the crowd out there is looking to use their modern skills, that means as IBM developers in the RPG and COBOL landscapes, we may only have access to half the talent pool out there, or less. So now we're introducing restrictions upon ourselves, which become very, very, very challenging. And IBM has introduced, and IBM certainly isn't asleep at the wheel. IBM has introduced modular coding in RPG all the way back in 1994. So the tools in there in the RPG space are there. But what we end up with in some cases, if it works, don't fix it. I think Michael mentioned this already. That's the challenge that we're facing out there. Is folks don't want to go in there and risk damaging the code or upsetting the online users and that kind of stuff by breaking something. And again, this code becomes very, very fragile. Again, contemporary skills that are coming out of the schools, the developers are looking for much more modular code. They've been trained on how to do functional programming with all local variables, and these become really, really big deals. Especially when you start looking at the raw statistics. Again, if you look at the Deloitte article out there that we've got here, they're saying millennials are now the most popular members of the workforce, representing about 1/3 of the workforce. So again, are you going to exclude them from your possible development base? What are some of the opportunities out there? And then we get into business logic, and that's what we see in the IBM shops that we work with on a day-to-day basis. This is the secret sauce that's making your company unique. In many cases, this is the source of competitive advantage. It could be your pricing algorithm. It could be the way you pick, pack, and ship. These things that make your company unique, you have to take forward. This is what is your competitive edge. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you work with that kind of stuff. The business logic in a monolithic program is literally buried in this monolithic program. So you have a choice. Do you dig it up and expose it, or do you leave it buried and just put a headstone on it and walk away? These are huge risks that we're dealing with. Okay, legacy maintenance. This is where we see IT shops struggling with their cost management scenarios, because obviously anybody who's implemented code knows that it's fantastic. I don't have to go back and do maintenance on it. No, of course we do. We have to go back and do maintenance on it, because we turn up bugs. There's tons and tons of statistics out there about how new development is a breeding ground for bugs and issues and that kind of thing. But in addition to that, the long-term, the legacy maintenance costs tend to be very, very extravagant. Some shops, again, according to Forrester, after surveying about 3,700 shops, they're illustrating 72% of development budget is on maintenance. Now, that may include new enhancements. This is basically anything that's not greenfield or just heads down new development. So certainly maintenance could be included on that. But when you're maintaining a legacy program, when you're adding new features to a legacy program, it takes longer than if it was more modular and broken up. Again, your mileage may vary, but these are fairly well researched statistics out there. And then when we get into how do we improve the maintenance numbers? How do we get faster? How do we get better at maintenance? How do we reduce bugs? How do we turn things faster? And one of those tips is to move towards automated testing. because you know what, the users are even, the developers are even busier than they were before. The users are even busier than they were before. Some of the users who knew the system inside and out, they're retiring too. So we got new staff coming on board all the time. We can't rely on that power user who used to always test the programs. We need to get into a smarter way of handling testing. So automated testing is really huge. And you know, Capgemini is indicating that in their report that less than 13% of the shops out there have adopted testing tools. That's another scary thought. So there's more and more opportunities to improve our statistics as we're moving forward. Okay, a couple more but it's again, and still, you know, why is the risk such a real big danger? And we get into what we call the legacy development style. When I grew up, it was a waterfall development, and that worked great. You know, the users would come to us with a requirement. We'd spec it out. We might even do some layout work and stuff like that. We'd say, okay, we got all the requirements. Let's go away and develop it. And we'd take, you know, it could be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. I've seen some development projects take longer than a year. You build it, you build the monster, and then you give it to the users, and what do they say? That's not what I asked for. That's not what I want. That's not what I need. My needs have changed. Didn't you guys see the email I sent you 6 months ago? You know, the conversation comes up, and waterfall becomes a real challenge. Now, what you have to realize is that waterfall does have its place in certain scenarios, in certain places. So it's never, this is one of the challenges with modern development. It's never an all or nothing sort of a thing. You know, the lines tend to blur a little bit, but overall, if all you're doing is waterfall, you might be finding some challenges there and some wasted development time. Getting into more of an agile development model. So of course, let's talk about what is agile. And the reality is agile means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But one of the things you want to remember about agile is, as we're doing things more iteratively with greater feedback from the user community earlier on in the process. So let's not build something over 6 months and then throw it in front of the users and then they scream and then we just say, they just don't know what they want. You know, what we want to do is we want to try and build pieces at a time, put it in front of the users, get that feedback right away. Oh, that color doesn't work. Oh, that feels not big enough. The sizing, the location, you know, these are things that can be fixed fairly quickly. And by getting that feedback early on in the process, we're not necessarily building, you know, applications faster. We tend to build them better and at lower cost because we're not, you know, spending a whole ton of money building something that's going to be thrown away or being heavily revised when it goes into the user's hands. Or worse yet, the users don't complain about it and it's not what they need and they build processes around it. And we see that a lot out there. Gartner says that 53% of the shops out there are still using waterfall, which is another, you know, kind of an interesting statistic, because, you know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because some applications, some approaches do benefit well from a waterfall approach, but maybe sub projects should be done using agile. But what we're seeing as in the 2020 State of Agile report, maturity is an issue. So people who are doing agile, maybe they're not all the way down the road with agile. And here's the other thing, here's a secret thing. That's not a bad thing either. Moving in a direction, right? Moving in a direction towards change is better than not changing at all. So so as the one graphic on here illustrates, you know, we start with waterfall development, we grew up with waterfall, we move towards incremental, doing bits and pieces at a time. We move towards iterative, and then we can move towards agile. I think if you try to jump into agile with both feet and no training and no coaching and that kind of stuff, it's a recipe for disaster. So we want to move slowly in that direction, but purposefully, and again to leverage the cliche that Michael used a few minutes ago. Agile is a journey; it's not a destination. It's going to continue to evolve, and it's very, very important that you be aware of that. And Michael.
Perfect. So I'm going to just jump in for one quick slide. And so, you know, as we're talking about different options for transformation, we wanted to kind of focus on rewriting. But before doing that, I wanted to kind of piggyback on something that Mike had mentioned earlier. There's another a risky transformation option, and that is buying a package. So we have a lot of clients that come to us and they talk about hey, great, one of our options is just kind of get rid of this custom application that we've had developed on the IBMI for the last 20 years and it's been running the organization. We're just going to buy a package and replace that. And where that might be valid for certain pieces of the organization, it's certainly not valid for things that bring you that competitive advantage that Mike was talking about. So you can certainly buy a package, but I think most of you have probably already determined that buying a package is not an option because of the fact that you are unique as a business, and that buying a software package really removes, again, that competitive advantage, not to mention the cost of packages and the ongoing reliance on those vendors and so forth. So just wanted to kind of throw that in there before jumping on to the actual slide at hand, which is rewriting. So, obviously, as you're looking at transformation options, kind of looking at the issues that you may be having, again, primarily probably from an RPG resource perspective, you look at a number of options. Rewrite is one of those. So I guess as we're looking at rewriting, if RPG is problematic for whatever reason, then rewriting to a modern language would theoretically remove that problem. And so where that makes sense at a high level, when we really start looking at rewriting as an option, we start seeing huge risks to success on rewrites. So Standish, as is shown here, has some really great statistics and research on that topic. I thought it was really interesting, and thus the die there. But for rewrites, there's kind of a 50-50 chance that you're going to get an outcome that you're going to be able to live with. And so notice that when we say it's not an outcome that you envision, but one that, even though it's wrought with challenges, you're finally able to deploy. And so I've been around long enough, and I know that nobody wants to go to the board with those kind of odds and say like, hey, we've got a 50-50 chance that we're going to be able to deliver exactly what you're needing it to be. And so that's a huge issue with rewrite. Secondly, I think if you look at that statistic a little bit differently, you're going to see that 96% of companies were unsuccessful in their rewrite endeavors. So that means only 4% of the companies that went down a rewrite initiative were successful. And so I'm not really surprised at those numbers. It's really, really hard, as the slide kind of depicts. It's hard to keep new development focused, and especially since so many organizations are trying to incorporate these really lofty enhancements and requirements into the rewriting scope, which many times sets a course of failure before the project is even really started. And so if your concern that drove you to a rewrite was that IT was really not delivering in a timely enough manner, you've just created another monster if you've started down a rewrite path, because IT is not going to be able to deliver anything until that rewrite project is finished. So bottom line, whether rewriting or buying a package, they're typically not a good answer for most companies, at least from a holistic perspective. So taking what you have and building on that is a much less risky move that really delivers a ton of business value along the way. Mike, back over to you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we like to do, again, we like to bring in statistics and kind of show you some of these things. There's a standard rule of thumb written by a gentleman by the name of Capers Jones, who's an American software engineer, has written dozens of books on software development and quality. And this is his chart. And I just encourage you as homework. I'm assigning you all homework now to take a look at this and try and understand it, right? And what he's trying to say here is that basically, as your programs get larger, they become harder to rewrite. So the rewrite effort model, for a 100-line program, piece of cake. 1,000-line program, piece of cake. What about the most important programs in your shop? Your order entry program, AP posting, shipping, pick, pack, and ship. These are probably the monolithic programs in your shop. They're the most sensitive. They're the most, rich in competitive advantage. And guess what? It's going to take you forever to rewrite them. It's not saying you can't do it. You need to be highly disciplined. Some companies are successful with the rewrites, but so many are not. And it's very, very important that you take this information that we're offering you here as seriously as possible. One other thing to keep in mind is that cloud. Everybody's, oh, the cloud, we're going to the cloud. Well, 75% of organizations, according to Gartner, are re-architecting their applications to be custom built on the cloud. That's interesting. But stop and think about that. Does that mean all of the code, some of the code, and what exactly does re-architecting mean? A rewrite is basically I'm taking what's there and I'm gonna rewrite it in a different language. I might add a couple of enhancements. Re-architecting says we're just build a whole new application. It might be based on some things. We might reuse some components, some ideas, but we're re-architecting, and that's true cloud implementations do tend to require those kinds of things. And again, for more homework, I want you to explore the different approaches to getting into the cloud. Everything from what we call lift and shift, which is rehosting, all the way on through replacing and re-architecting and so on and so forth. One of the things that we look at from a cloud perspective, again, it's not an all or nothing. It's not a clear-cut deal. Some people will try and sell you on the cloud as the future, and it is. There's no arguing that point. But it doesn't mean that you need to push everything into the cloud tomorrow in order to take advantage of it. There may be smarter ways to be able to take advantage of some of the features that we've got out there. So to kind of summarize a little bit, we want to, how do we address the risks? We've offered you up a lot of concern, a lot of what we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But now how do we address these things? And as a way of softening that blow a little bit, let's talk about a couple of these things at least at a high level. So we've got staffing and education. Bumper sticker is always if you think education is expensive, try ignorance, right? So education, we can educate and develop the new talent, or we can move some of our technology to where that new talent exists, right? So we've got what are the cool kids learning today in school? What are they coming out with skills that what do they want to work with? So these are things to consider. Tooling. Are we using contemporary tooling? Are we trying to use contemporary tooling? Maybe we can use one of the new buzzwords is tools as a service. In other words, using the web browser. Some sophisticated web applications can take advantage of this kind of stuff. How do we tear down that monolith? And I'm telling you, folks, there's no easy way to do this, right? But there's things that can help you along it. We can modularize our code organically as we go, which I've seen a lot of shops doing, or we can also leverage some tooling to help us break up that monolith. So again, there's things out there that can help you with that road. RPG free, getting the RPG free is, maintaining RPG free code is so much more luxurious than trying to decipher RPG2 code or RPG3 code even. And of course, there's also some tremendous solutions out there in the open source space, and we'd love to leverage things in the open source space. And of course, I've already mentioned Agile, but getting into development paradigms where we're doing things more on an API or a service basis, and of course leveraging Agile to move our ball forward. IBM in their recent Think conference, Arvind Krishna did a really good job of communicating that IBM has learned. Arvind actually comes from the technology space at IBM. He's not sales. Don't worry, he'll sell you something. But he's really his roots are mired in tech, which is fantastic. One of the things I love about where IBM is going now. And IBM they realize trying to push customers in one direction or another isn't smart. They realize that there's this thing called hybrid cloud. And the whole idea of hybrid cloud is that some applications belong on the IBM I. Some applications belong in the cloud. And it's not a bad thing to have them peacefully coexist. Again, it's your decision. Your mileage may vary. You can take advantage of some of these things, like when you need to take advantage of infinite scalability, horizontal scaling, microservices architect, true microservices architectures, and maybe unique advantages of certain language constructs. These are all things that are worth noting. And in Arvind's note, in his letter to the employees when he took over, he made a comment in there. I love this line is hybrid cloud and AI are two dominant forces driving change for our clients. Yes, they are. And must have the maniacal focus of the entire company. I think Arvind is setting the direction, which is just wonderful. So the things we want to see coming out of folks like that. So how does Profound help in this sort of a model? And that is with our flexible transformation service. And key word there is flexible. The flexible means we can take as much or as little of that code base into the 21st century, to move on to a target architecture. Our approach is really got four major elements. We're going to discover, we're going to understand the applications, the businesses, the priorities, where is, and as Michael indicated in the beginning of the presentation, it's not just talking the tech or the techie folks, it's talking to the business users, finding out what the needs are of the organization, making sure we don't leave anything off the table. We're going to estimate based on that discovery information that we get, and we're going to build that roadmap. We're going to quantify the phases, because we have yet to find a company that wants to do a big bang. They want to do a little bit at a time, and they want to make sure that it works before they commit more money and more resources to the next phase. That makes perfect sense. That's smart business, and we get that. So we want to make sure we address all those concerns. In the delivery, we're gonna deliver in two chunks. There's two swim lanes that you see there. In phase one, we're going to transform like for like, and in phase 1B, we come in and we weave in the enhancements while another team is working on phase two. By breaking this up into chunks, we can start to really digest the applications and help them move towards that target architecture, which in our cases, in many cases, is going to be Node.js, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Because at the end of the day, one of the other things that we have to make sure we're doing, just moving an application from one technology to another doesn't necessarily, especially if you do like for like, doesn't necessarily add value, right? What do the users get out of that? Oh, they lose IT for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and you haven't helped me move the ball forward. We need to keep the eye on moving forward. We're going to get benefits moving toward a target architecture, like better access to resources and maybe faster turn times on development. But we do need to deliver something for the users to be able to digest. In addition, as you're moving down that road, as you're moving through phase one and phase two and phase three and phase four, there's a scary term out there called coexistence. We need to be able to maintain one foot in the old world while we're building that one foot and transforming that foot into the new world. And what's really cool is that all of the tools that we have at Profound basically give us the ability to leverage into that coexistence world and support that coexistence world, because we've got many components that make up the ecosystem at Profound, and we're happy to talk about them. I'm not going to talk about each one here right now, but many of these pieces of the puzzle we have a ton of experience with. Our services team been working with for years. So we come to the table while other organizations will talk about coexistence. We can show you that we've been doing this. And we can leverage this moving forward, because all of our tools provide that tremendous ability, and the development environment is 100% in the browser. We don't make you install an extra tool, a proprietary tool, or anything like that. It's basically you're going to use your browser to do a lot of the development work and build those coexistence pieces as we're moving forward. Now, one of the things that always comes up in these discussions when we're talking about transformation is, hey, will that code that we go to be maintainable by my team? And what is going to be the maintenance level of that sort of thing? And there's a lot of elements that go into code maintainability. I mentioned earlier modularization, being able to break things out, being able to move into an API architecture and leverage unit testing. And our transformation tooling has the ability to actually do a lot of these pieces. It's not going to, again, it's not going to be an all or nothing sort of a deal. We can turn on and turn off different pieces that make sense. But leveraging some of these things like strong type checking, which is a hallmark of RPG, and being able to use that in JavaScript, in Node.js, well, guess what? We've built components into that space. Our R&D team has done a fantastic job leveraging those components that help accelerate that development time, so we can move down that road as quickly as possible. And then we've got a flexible target architecture. A lot of people accuse us, oh, you guys are Profound, you're moving people off the platform. No, we're not. Hey, Node.js runs on IBM i. Let's take advantage of it on the IBM i. But for some folks, they want to be able to do horizontal scaling instead of vertical scaling. Great, we could do that on Linux. We could do it in the cloud. But now we're using a technology that we could run anywhere. And that's what we want to do. We want to take advantage of that. I love running these things on the IBM i because it's just so rock solid and predictable. But at the end of the day, maybe there's a need to have something that is infinitely scalable into a horizontal landscape. Michael?
Perfect. So I'm going to rush through these, but as we're talking about ways in which Profound can really help you reduce the risk on some of these transformation initiatives, I just wanted to highlight something. I think Mike has actually talked about each of these already, but it's really the people, our processes, and our tools. Our people have been focused on IBM modernization for the last 20 years, and we've got tools that will automate the process, whether that's automating the process from a user interface perspective, whether that is transforming the database from DB2400 over to something else, or whether that are processes that are utilized by our services team. We kind of combine all of those to bring together a really comprehensive solution that, partnered with you as experts in your business, really bring together a journey that will really bring about success at the end of the day. So as we move on to the next slide, we really just wanted to kind of talk about some of the value from four bullet points that we'll kind of talk about value. One is faster time to market. So we're going to help you really realize value quickly through our solution, because you can put transform programs into production early on and then experience that value on the investment on every single milestone throughout the journey. We're going to help you reduce risk, and that's really through, as I mentioned before, the combination of our services offering along with the tools and the methodologies that we have in place. It's all about reducing the risk for you on that piece. And then we've also got the truly modern code base, where we've really been disruptive in our industry with our target language of Node.js. We're the only ones in the industry that go to Node.js. All other solutions are typically transforming into either .NET or Java languages. And you're going to end up with a code base that's really portable, cloud ready, easily integrated, and so forth. So we will move you into this environment of not only having a truly modern code base, but also setting you up for rapid application development beyond, because as we mentioned earlier, transformation doesn't end once you've reached your target environment. The target environment is constantly changing, and so we want to provide you ongoing rapid application development tools that allow you to address those business needs as they present themselves. And so on to the next. Perfect. So just wanted to kind of mention this. Look, as you look to partner with someone, and hopefully Profound can be one of those partners for you. But partners are relationships, and just like any other relationship, you need to take the same care and concern in choosing your transformation partner that you would in choosing, let's say, a life partner. So I kind of wanted to point out some characteristics that you should maybe be looking at in organizations, and specifically how Profound differentiates ourselves compared to some of our other competitors in this space. So one is, we had mentioned this previously, we are unique that we move people to Node.js. Everyone else is basically taking them to .NET or to Java. I thought it was really important, again, to stress again that we set you up for the future. So we don't stop once transformation is done. We really want to provide you a foundation so that future development teams can continue on the vision of the organization and continue not only maintaining the existing transform code, but adding to that code and taking care of the business needs along the way. Mike has kind of touched on the end-to-end focus that we have as an organization, so I'll kind of move beyond that. He also touched on the staged transformation, but I want to just say it is really kind of a unique situation. Staged transformation, reduce risks, right? So the whole Big Bang theory of transforming a complete application is no longer really a viable option for most organizations. They need to have it done in a staged manner. And that's really part of our DNA. And so when I say it's part of our DNA, it's that the staged approach, the coexistence that Mike was talking about, it doesn't even have to be really thought of. It just works. And so where other vendors might be actually having to write some of those coexistence pieces, these are just native pieces of our transformation that bring added value and reduce the risk along the way. Mike had talked about the single interface, so I won't be talking about that. But I do want to kind of talk about the financially strong piece. You know, as you're looking at a partner, you want to make sure that you know that you are being given the focus that you need. And so there's a lot of organizations that talk about customer first. We actually live that, and we're able to do that because we are debt-free as an organization. And so our focus is not on shareholder pressure. Our focus is on what clients need from us. And we've been doing that for 20 years, again, focused on the IBMI. We've got an extremely strong reputation in the market regarding IBMI modernization and transformation. We've got 20 years of happy clients, tons of success stories, minimal attrition. We never had legal action against us. And all of that's because we really treat clients the way that we want to be treated. So if you're partnering with someone, you want to make sure that they're respected, they're trustworthy, and we really hope that we can be that partner for you and as we move forward. So with that, I wanted to kind of transition a little bit over to Node. And Mike is going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to kind of talk about some of the business benefits surrounding Node. So we talked earlier about the relationship of dollars and value. So Node.js reduces those development costs considerably. And one of the reasons it allows that is because it allows developers to really focus on innovation as opposed to the maintenance pieces of things. All of the talk about developer productivity, platform independence, open source benefits, those mean absolutely nothing if applications don't perform well. So there have been numerous studies on performance. Node.js performs extremely well, and many times so much better than some of the other languages that are out there. We also started this conversation talking about how difficult it is to find RPG programmers. And so since JavaScript and Node.js are the most widely used languages in the world, I just want to kind of repeat that you can easily find developers in this vast pool of developer availability in the JavaScript and Node.js world. And then I just wanted to kind of mention again that Node.js is proven. It is enterprise ready. It's gone through all of those growing pains for the last, I'm going to say 10 years, and it's come out a star for really enterprise applications that are either deployed on-premise or in the cloud. So Node is an absolutely fantastic target language for you to be considering as you move forward. So on to the next. I'll just mention quickly, because I know we're very limited on time, that it's a great application not only for new development for people outside of the IBMI, but it's also a great language for IBMI RPG application developers as well. Very easy to learn. It supports both front-end and back-end development for full stack. From a native perspective, again, as Mike said, it runs natively on the IBMI, and it's really a lot less complex than Java. It's kind of everywhere. There's over 1 million NPM packages. I think Mike might be talking about NPM, but that's Node Package Management. If you get a chance, take a look at that. If Mike doesn't talk about it, it's one of the really strong points about Node that we want to communicate. The language is optimized and it eliminates that bad monolithic code for improved efficiency. We're able to deliver REST web services faster than RPG. So whether Node.js code is working against a small data set or a large set with billions of records, those programs really just scale as you scale. As far as flexibility, it really provides a varied and robust set of features for both web, mobile, and API development. And obviously it is portable, as was mentioned earlier. So it can extend those applications to the cloud and other non-IBMI platforms if those needs are important to you. And last but not least, it's agile. It really supports an iterative approach to the business transformation model. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Mike, did we lose you?
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, great.
Got it. Okay.
So rather than spend a lot of time talking about each and every company here, what I want to do is I want to focus in on Netflix, because they're certainly, I think, one of the most prevalent players out there in the space, and they also have a couple of videos out on YouTube you can take a look at to see what they've done with Node. It's amazing, the level of business acumen that's adopted Node.js and the JavaScript world that's out there that can support this. And they've really done some amazing things. So it's worth taking a look. Again, more homework for you tonight. I'll go on to the next slide, which talks about, this is a RedMonk survey. Now, RedMonk basically looks at the activity on GitHub, which is a very, very popular code storage repository, and also some of the chatter on Stack Overflow. And what they're seeing is that JavaScript it's in the #1 slot and has been for quite some time. From September 2012 to June 2020, we're seeing it, jockeying for top-notch spot with Java and PHP and Python, that kind of stuff. But really, JavaScript is huge, and that's really what Node.js is written in. The JS stands for JavaScript. So definitely worth taking a look at some of these studies that we have out here as you Google around. And of course, if JavaScript is nice, what about Node? Well, let me explain something. Now, a lot of these charts that you might see out there, you might not see Node as a language, because really Node is not. Node is really much more of a framework than it is a language. It's a server-side framework. It's designed to run JavaScript on the server. That's what Node's all about. And so when you look at it in that context, again, this is a 2020 developer survey from Stack Overflow. Node.js is got more than half of the developers out there are building applications and with this tooling versus .NET versus TensorFlow versus React. Now the reality though is that in a given shop, a Node.js shop, they may still be using some of the other technologies, but look at the overwhelming majority of folks who are leveraging Node. One last slide to kind of tip it in. Michael introduced NPM, which is basically the Node package managers. This is the secret sauce of application development. It's about taking what other people have done, OPC, other people's code, right, and leveraging that in your application. So as you look at this chart down here, again, it's available at moduleaccounts.com. We see that Maven, which is really the Java ecosystem, has somewhere in the area of 351,000 packages. They're adding 167 a day. But when you go to Node, the Node ecosystem is well into 4 times that size at 1.3 million, probably 1.4 million, and darn near 1,000 packages a day being contributed into that application code base. It's amazing how much great stuff is out there, which is one of the reasons why we've adopted it, because we know that when a customer comes to us with a need, we go out to NPM, we see if we can integrate it into our framework, and boom, and it's there in no time. It's amazing how fast how productive it makes the R&D department. So as we kind of wind things down here, the reality is, the future is at risk. We need to be looking at something, as we're moving forward. We can't just kind of turn a blind eye or bury our heads in the sand. We need to understand, what are we going to do? And that is, we need to identify the risks. We need to own them. We need to build that plan. We need to start executing, and we need to go into it not with that waterfall approach, with an attitude that we're going to stumble. We're going to stub our toe. So measure, revise, and keep implementing. Keep turning that crank over and over and over again. Michael?
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thought to that, and that is, most importantly, really partner with a trusted vendor. It's probably the biggest risk reducer that I can share during this session. So really, again, find a vendor that has real vast knowledge of the IBM I RPG environment, and also the target languages and platforms. Find someone that has automation to kind of navigate that transformation journey. Find someone that has automation to integrate those pieces that are transformed, because every single journey has pieces that will be left behind and need to still be part of the equation until they're not. Find someone that has expertise in all things modern, not just transformation, but UI modernization, database modernization, people modernization, right? Training people on new processes. And then someone that also has a services team that was going to really support the transformation, either in advance of the transformation, during the transformation, and after the transformation. And so one of the things I guess I'll just leave you with is that Profound hopes to be that partner. We really look forward to exploring that transformation options with you. So with that, Miranda, over to you.
All right, thanks so much to both of you. There was definitely a lot to learn today. Before we hop into the Q&A, I just want to make a few housekeeping announcements. So keep a lookout in your inbox for our document answering all of the questions brought up today, which should go out over the next couple of days. We will also be sharing a recording of this video, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take the survey on your way out. And if you'd like to learn more about our offerings and services or schedule a demo, contact our sales reps at sales@profoundlogic.com or fill out a form on our website, profoundlogic.com. Now back to Mike and Michael for questions. And go ahead and feel free to type it into the little section there so they can answer anything you might not know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's see. So actually, the questions are kind of light, and we are slammed up against the top of the hour. So what I'm going to suggest is why don't we do this? What we're going to do is Miranda's going to send a note out, as she indicated here, and what we're going to do is we'll include Michael and I will take the questions offline, and we're going to answer them all, and then we're going to send them out as with the the information with regards to the presentation today. But I'm going to go ahead and say and echo Miranda's thoughts. Just say thank you everybody for spending a very valuable part of your time with us today. It's been a genuine pleasure working with Michael to put this presentation together, and we look forward to doing more of these as we move forward, as we talk more and more about the transformation solutions, as well as all the other solutions we have here at Profound. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say let's wrap it up, and let's everybody have a great day.